Implementing the recommendations. Our recommendations is that we continue the Pima County Auditing Committee for at least the next 6 months to oversee the implementation of these recommendations. Our suggestions are the Audit Committee meets with the MTCVB Executive Committee to go over the report to make sure that there is full understanding. And one of the things that we really believe needs to happen is a collaborative effort between the MTCVB, the MTCVB's Executive Board, and this Oversight Committee to drive us to use the best practices to better drive this destination. The MTCVB Executive Committee and staff meet with its Board of Directors to prioritize recommendation and receive authorizations going forward, and this would be basically coming up with a master plan. What are the priorities, what are the needs, and what do we need to drive going forward? MTCVB provide the Auditing Committee with an ongoing monthly report that details completed implementation and recommendations, and with that the Auditing Committee would provide monthly report to the County Administrator. What I wanted to show you here is what I talk about is a non-competitive budget. And through work with the CVB and our committee, we looked at who is our competitive set? Who do we sell against on a day in and day out basis? We're not comparing apples to apples in all cases here because of the size of the city and the scope of what they're dealing with, but this is who we compete against on a daily basis. And I think it's quite staggering when you look at some of the budgets that are there compared to where the MTCVB's budget is right now. In comparing, of the 9 people in the set, and again, you can find this in the book, 4 of the competitors actually increased their funding to the CVB from '07. 5 showed a decrease, and Tucson had the largest decrease of $3.5 million, or almost 34%. We've all been charged with doing more with less in our private lives and our businesses. And what the MTCVB has been charged with, I really applaud their efforts. Losing 34% of your budget, but yet expecting the same results is a difficult thing. And as I work as the chairman of the state association, we're trying to do the same thing with the state to get AOT funding back, because people need to know about who we are and what we have to offer. And here's another illustration that shows the budget of 6 and 7 at just at $10 million, and right now for 10 and 11 you're under $6 million. So actually a huge decrease in what we've asked them to do.
Pardon me again, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson and I know that these charts, these graphs have to tell us that the 34%, it doesn't specify, that's a reduction of less bed tax, less sales tax, or withholding of funding from, per se, the city of Tucson, for example?
I think you have a combination of all. I think we all know that taxes are down because revenues are down that are driven by the economies. But we also know that funding has been withheld from different entities. And one of the points I did want to make is, and you've given me that opportunity,
thank you,
is a thank you to the Pima County Board of Supervisors for keeping that funding for the MTCVB wholly intact. And I think that is very visionary on your part, that tourism being the greatest economic driver for this region. I thank you for that.
But we've held firm, but other governments have withdrawn or retracted some of the funding from past
Budgets
years.
have been modified and monies have been pulled from the MTCVB's budget.
That might point back to one of your other observations, so I'm sure we all know which one that is. So I just wanted to point out that I guess that your government audit certainly has indicated that the stakeholders have been taken for granted in the other governments possibly, and felt that there was no obligation for them to fund up the monies. Let's say, who are those other governments that have withdrawn or restricted the amount of funding that they've given to the MTCVB? City of Tucson's one. They only give, instead of 50% like Pima County gives from the bed tax, they give 33%, I read in the report.
That is correct.
What other government shorted the CVB?
I don't think there's been any other governments that shorted. The primary funding sources are Tucson and Pima County, and I know there is work on looking at some of the funding sources from Oro Valley, but the two primary sources are Pima County, and I can see that you are well versed in the report.
Thank you.
Typically, the MTCVBs throughout the nation in our study, they are funded 54%. So you can see that our community is a little underfunded.
They're funded 54% from government?
From government and taxes and private entities. And Pima County is funding at 50%, so that is well within that wheelhouse.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry to again interrupt
No,
your conversation.
not a problem. I would just like to read a quote in closing here. How did I get so disorganized that I can't even find my
All
own
the
quote?
interruptions, and I apologize.
No problem. When we put the report together, a letter of introduction was sent to Mr. Huckleberry. And I'd like to read from that, the second to the last paragraph, and what it states, and this is the feeling of our board. The report you have in front of you is the culmination of many dedicated hours of community stakeholders that believe in our community and believe in the Metropolitan Tucson Convention and Visitors Bureau. It is the belief of this committee that the MTCVB is vital to our community's continued tourism development. Fragmentation or privatization of parts of this organization would be detrimental to our community. It is our hope that the MTCVB staff and board will take this report in the spirit of which it was formulated, that for assistance and partnership. Many best practices are detailed in this report, which, if put into place, will assist the MTCVB in becoming an even more vibrant part of our tourism development and further enhancing its position in tourism. One last quote as I get ready to go to the Governor's Conference on Tourism later today is, as we celebrate our centennial, and we know that the city or the state was founded on the 5 C's, climate being one of them, we can no longer rely on sunshine to drive and fuel our state. Tourism is big business, and it's generating billions of dollars and providing countless jobs and taxes to this community. And if we, meaning our board, this board, the MTCVB, the community at large, if we're not aggressive in fighting for that, you can bet that other states are poised and ready to welcome those visitors and their money. That concludes my report, and I open it up to any questions that you may have.